All right, what's up, South Florida? John D. Villarreal here for the John D. Villarreal radio show on 1210 AM Miami, the man, the only station where you are the man. Now, we're talking about so much stuff here. We're talking about presidential politics. We're talking about AOC versus Nancy Pelosi and how that all breaks down. And as I said, I've been predicting this and laying this out, for the last few weeks. I wish I was there in the studio and we had everything all set up and I could play back the tracks and stuff like Rush and these other people do and show you. But all you got to do is listen to it. If you listen to this show every week on 1210 AM Miami, the man, from 11 to 1 on Sundays, you will be totally informed and ready to go on politics, business, life, health, so many different things, and so many things that this radio station brings you. I got to take a little time out here. It's so great to have this kind of station for South Florida, because South Florida needs this kind of station, in my opinion, to bring you so many things that this audience needs and wants, and to deliver them, whether it's great sports, whether it's politics, whether it's lifestyle stuff. It's beautiful and it's perfect for South Florida, in my opinion. But let's get back to this. Let's talk. Here's why it's important. It's not just, okay, this is just one story. It's no. You have to understand that everyone in politics, they're a part of a quote-unquote team, kind of like a sports team, whether it's the Democratic Party, the Republican Party, other parties, but they're also independent contractors, right? They're all looking out for numero uno. So what you have happening is you had this wave of anti-Trump wins in Congress, if you will, in 2018. And a lot of that was built on the promise of, we're going to get rid of Trump, we're going to impeach Trump, and we're anti-Trump, and we're going to go far left. So it was almost this counter-reaction. Yet they have delivered on none of that, in my opinion. Well, the bill is now coming due. It's like spend on a spending spree with a credit card or something like that, right? And now you just got the bill. So here comes the election of 2020 coming up, because it's not just the presidential stuff. Every single seat in Congress is up every 2 years. So now these very same people that ran on impeach Trump, Russia hoax, in my opinion, Green New Deal, blah, 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 they all have to face re-election. Now, what's funny is that, you have an establishment not just on, it's the swamp, right? The Republican side, and what Trump talks about, really talks about both sides, obviously, this with the swamp. But the focus a lot of times is the focus is on both sides. But what you also have, you also have an establishment on the Democratic side. And a lot of those people were not happy that AOC knocked off the number 3 Democrat there in her district. And they're not happy with the squad, they're not happy with the branding, and they're not happy with people not falling in line and being like other freshman Congress people and respecting leadership and all that type of stuff, in my opinion. So there was already plans for primarying those people. Just like, in my opinion, Florida's own Congressman, former Congressman West, in my opinion, found out, because he was very vocal. He was out there and I think it was, he didn't have a long congressional career, right? And I'm not saying that I'm making no commentary on anything like that, other than to state the facts that when you are a young congressperson and you're out there getting in front of the party or making your own headlines, or perhaps you feel like you're bigger than the party or whatever it is. And in my opinion, I don't think that's right? But I mean, we're going to talk about that in a second. In other words, meaning that I don't think that the party should be mad about that. I think that if you're able to get headlines, you're able to get headlines. If you represent your district, you represent your district. If you've got issues, you should be able to speak on those issues. But that's not the way the parties work. Parties want to enforce party discipline. Parties have their own plans, their own hierarchy. You got to wait in turn, and that was the joke they said about the Republican Party for how long, right? That it's so and so's turn, or you have to pay your dues, whatever. And we had these string of presidential candidates that kind of represented that, in my opinion, whether it was Bob Dole or Mitt Romney or Senator McCain. Governor Romney and Senator Dole and etc. And that was the sort of critique. And so here comes Donald Trump, never been in politics, and he just upset the apple cart and say, I'm running for president, and he won. So there's been a strong reaction to that, but also the same thing. Here was someone who was a former bartender, pretty young, and she knocked out the number 3 Democrat, and now she's like basically one of the leaders of the Democratic Party. So that shook things up. So there, and then you have the squad. So you were always going to have, in my opinion, the establishment on the Democratic side that were going to try to take those, or look for. They would not. How about this? I don't think they would be unhappy if there was an opportunity to replace the squad with people that were more, whatever you want to call it, in line, loyal, pay their dues, fill in the blank from their side. Because I don't think they like that negative press, and I think they understand that the party's being pulled too far left. At the same time, you've had AOC, I think out there saying that she was going to primary some people that didn't fall in line with her stuff. So the battle is on. It's real, in my opinion. That's why it matters. They all have elections. Big money's flowing both ways. Who's going to win? There is a real battle on now for the soul of the Democratic Party, and that is hyper accelerated by what we see going on in the presidential race. So when you see Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders nipping, especially Warren, nipping at Biden's toes, if you will, and surpassing him in Iowa now with Senator Warren, I think that emboldens the squad and all that type of stuff. So that's why it's important, because it's not going away. It is real. It is real. And it's going to present a real challenge for the Democrats. And I think it's exactly what President Trump wants. And it's all going sort of according to plan in a way, but it's not really Trump's plan. I mean, this is just the politics. It's the reality of where it is. And I think so much of what happened on the Democratic side right now, as we've been talking about for the last several weeks, is just pure fantasy land. It makes no sense, especially when it's all totaled up. Green New Deal, healthcare for all, weaker open borders, no student, forgive all student loans, free college, on and on and on. You add it up, and who can afford that? No, nobody could afford that. I don't think you could afford that in your own family, let alone a country of 340 million people and growing. It's madness. It makes no sense whatsoever, and it's just not possible. So here the Democrats are, and they have to deliver. So if you've delivered basically nothing for your hard left base, who are heavily represented in the media, I think the darlings of the media, how do you expect those voters to show up? Because you have to have, this is going to be a big base turnout election, I think. It's a big problem. It's a big problem. So that's what they're dealing with, and that's why it's important. Now we flip it, and now I'll say this. We also talked about the Democratic debate. So it's not just John Villarreal that feels this way. We talked about the Democratic debate. So a little preview on a couple other things we're going to talk about. We're going to start running through stuff quickly here. There's so much to talk about. I told you that. I want to get to the football games because that's really important for sports fans in Miami and everything like that. But the American people, in my opinion, did not react well to that last Democratic debate. They saw it, they heard it. Beto, hey, we're gonna take your guns. So it's beyond gun control. It's one thing to say, hey, we're all for gun control or sensible gun control. It's another thing to say that we're taking all the AR-15, we're taking guns, whether it's AR-15, maybe AK-47s. I don't know. I have to look exactly what he said. It's my opinion, my paraphrase, and everything else that we just talked about, and everything we talked about, the last few weeks. And guess what? As Rush talked about, surprise, surprise, President Trump's polls went up, significantly, 4 points, stuff like that. And so when you look at where the approval ratings are for Trump, they're not bad. They're pretty good. They're pretty good. Maybe not amazing, but pretty good. And I think they're beyond where President Obama was at this point in his first term. So, and where's the direction going? So, I mean, once again, I said this before. This is why if you listen to this, you're way ahead of the game. You can't say Trump, it's one thing, Trump versus all these people. No. When it gets down to being real, this becomes a choice election. Trump versus whom? Senator Warren or Senator Sanders? I don't think Vice President Biden's going to be there. So the American people saw that debate and they're like, we don't want anything to do with it. We don't want anything to do with it, and Trump's polls went up. So what did I also preview? I also previewed last week. I said it's going to come down to the Democrats basically have nothing. They have to hope for a recession, or they got to try to pump up all kinds of scandals and phony or whatnot. And that's what you're going to be seeing. You're going to be seeing, quote unquote, October surprises from now until the election. I mean, instead of an October surprise, meaning one big one right before the election, we may see 3+ of these up to the election. The energy is gone on the Democratic side. Because the Russia hoax, in my opinion, it went up in the wind. They have passed basically nothing. Their plans don't work. When they actually talk about what they're going to do, the American people are like, we don't want anything to do with that. And so I told you about this October surprise stuff and the scandal machine that was going to have to start cranking or continue to crank, fictitious, fantasy-based or otherwise. And here we go. What did we see last week? The whole Trump, Biden, and Ukraine story. Now, trying to explain this, I'm not even going to bother, because I think it's so hokey. It's so Byzantine. It's like when you were a kid and you were playing that game, the Mousetrap, and you had the boot hits this and the Rube Goldberg machine or whatever, and then it goes down here and it slides down this chute and it pops a string and this is, dude. And then at some point in this whole story, the thing, the ball or whatever goes out of the room. The whole thing breaks down. It makes no sense. It's all silliness, in my opinion. But what's not silly, and what has boomeranged, and what this story has been, and of course the Democrats use this as another call for impeachment. And oh, by the way, they also called for the impeachment of Justice Kavanaugh now. I mean, and I didn't want to dignify that whole thing with the New York Times. I mean, what a debacle that was. You had a situation there where the supposed central person in that story says she can't even remember it. I mean, what is going on in journalism now? Quote unquote journalism, in my opinion. So I mean, they're calling for impeaching Supreme Court justices. I mean, I think we had a full, pretty big conversation about that whole thing. We talked about that. They're talking about impeaching Trump over this Ukraine thing that they can't even explain too coherently, in my opinion. But what it does, this whole Ukraine thing, put a focus on, was a story that I was aware of, that was bubbling beneath the surface about, you want to talk about, an interesting story, a potential blockbuster story. How about the story of what's going on with the Biden family and some of these foreign governments, potentially, in my opinion? Now, as I understand it from the news reports, you have Hunter Biden, who was following his, at least in one or two trips, or I don't know. I'm not super up on the meme, but there was Hunter Biden, I guess, was doing some business in Ukraine and in China. I think I heard Mayor Giuliani on Fox News Sunday talking about it, saying like, yeah, he was on a plane trip with Vice President Biden when he was vice president, went over to China and collected like $1 billion some odd for his private equity fund, according to Mayor Giuliani. That's pretty crazy. Then he was doing some business in Ukraine, and Vice President Biden is on tape saying, yeah, he told them, and there was some kind of prosecutor looking into a business that Hunter Biden, I believe, was involved in my opinion. And all of a sudden, Vice President Biden on tape says, in my opinion, if I'm remembering this right, that if they don't change the prosecutor in that case, looking into the company that his son's involved with, in my opinion, in Ukraine, they had 6 hours to do it, or they're not getting money from the United States. And surprise, surprise, the prosecutors changed. And as Mayor Giuliani said, since when does the vice president, you know, in my paraphrase of his words, handpick a prosecutor or pick a prosecutor in another in another country? It's crazy. We're going to talk about it. It's a very interesting story. And there's a lot I think that needs to be examined here that's not being talked about. And I think that this whole thing in Ukraine was a huge tactical mistake, because it's going to be a big boomerang. It's already boomeranging on the Democrats. We're going to talk about this. It's a John D. Villarreal radio show on 1210 AM Miami, The Man, the only station where you are the man.